110. Can the REMAC members on the phone please identify themselves?
Hey, Doc.
Anybody else? Okay. Any other guests on the phone? Correspondence log and the minutes have been circulated. Is there any questions or amendments to those? John Mack, have a motion?
Motion.
Second? Any discussion or addendums? All right, all in favor? All right, they pass. CMAC Semco report. Dr. Walter, do you have anything to add? I don't think it's been a meeting since
No, I actually wasn't at the last meeting. I was at a conference. I think we had a REMAC meeting after.
Yeah. I can sum up my REMAC chairman's reports with the word "see you suckers." Trauma Advisory Committee, Beth Moses.
It's trauma season, and that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Nurse Advisory Committee report, Bruce Treepass. See you online. No, okay. Program agency reports, the Lake Plains, Rob McCartan.
Good afternoon. We've had just a few classes since the last meeting, and the core sponsorships have now started piling in their upcoming classes. We're notifying that Oakfield and Ridgeway are both doing Narcan. Additionally, South Wilson is here to ask for the REMAC for endorsement to further pursue their ALSFR that they've been trying to get. I do have a rep here if you wanted to, if anybody wanted to speak to them. We've been pushing the credentialing. Unfortunately, currently we're sitting about 10%, which kind of scares me, but often we see them come in the last couple of weeks anyways. So I'll be monitoring that. Rapids is going to be hosting a mental health first aid class in August. It's a great opportunity. It's a great class. If anybody's interested, just get in touch with me and I'll push you in the right direction. But I believe I did put the information out on that. Other than that, we've had no real additions to the PEC agencies. Council meetings are listed. And on a last note, I do want to mention that Big Lakes did finally qualify in the Grants Gateway, so they are now reestablished as an entity as well. That's all I have.
Any questions for Rob? Stems, Alicia?
Since the last meeting, we held a dialysis emergencies training with Emily from Mercy Hospital. We have quite a few packs in our area, and we're still trying to push that out. The biggest thing we have coming up is next weekend we're having an instructor course at Elevated Base in Baltimore to instruct to our instructors at our building. And then two things kind of in the distant future that we are in planning stages for. In the fall, we're planning a mental health first aid instructor course. So this would to teach EMS providers
this is the statewide BLS, and then the collaboratives are gonna end up falling kind of in the same category. So we're in crunch hour here because this couldn't have happened at the worst time, I think, with credentialing and the fact that we're kind of beating the doors down at the local squads to try to get people to be compliant with this. And it's always, a little rough. But now we're trying to crank out a protocol rollout that we thought was going to be a unified approach, but now the state came back to the table and said that doesn't look like that for their own internal reasons, that they're going to have their LMS up and be able to accommodate this. So that, once again, pushes this back to the regions, us, to try to figure out what we're going to do, and we have not a long period of time to do it because, well, we're almost at the end of June now, and then August 1st was the go live date for people who have been in service. So we kind of got to figure this out. We're not going to solve this right here, right now, but I think, whatever, the conversation was here, I think we now have to have a conversation, just 3 region wide, and figure out, are we going to tackle this by our own individual regions? Are we going to do it by as a REMAC wide thing? How are we going to do this?
Is August 1st is the start date or the end date that there's
No, that's the start date. We can't go any earlier than August 1st. I don't know if there was a hard end date that was established. I don't recall.
I was under the impression you're supposed to switch to those as of August 1st. That was the impression, because I was like, they put them out in May.
It was worded as a no earlier than August 1st.
Oh, was no earlier?
It was a no earlier than August 1st. But I don't know if there was an absolute,
Yeah, they didn't even tell us. They just got up on the website, because I actually called Dr. Walton and said, we need to make sure people aren't utilizing it. Because all of a sudden they just showed up. Now, I did reach out to Jason Haig, who was on the education committee, who, my understanding was that he was putting together AEMT education, a video that Dr. Daly was going to approve and release. And then he also had a
Spreadsheet.
summary for us to share with the providers. He was traveling last week and he's supposed to be getting it to me this week. But I can definitely follow up with him again. But we are we sent it out to our medical director saying, we're kind of blind right now. What would you like us to do? And we're really not sure what to do.
So,
Dr. Clemens?
yes, please.
Sid Major, just from the Bureau's perspective, I will say that that Ryan and his team have been working diligently on putting together a high-level overview of a summary of the changes on both the adult and pediatric side. I hope they're going to release that. I'll try to get some more information to share off with you, but Don, everything that you guys have said is absolutely correct, but I did want to add that additional piece. I know the timeline is short and it's it's delayed, so thank you.
Yeah, even if it's not ready yet, if you could maybe give us an update when you know about what the anticipated ETA for that being done would be, that might just help us with our future planning.
Yeah. I have a call at 2:30 today. I'll follow back up with the doctor.
That'd be great.
Hey, Ed, is August 1st the day they have to switch over, or the first day that they're allowed to switch, or can you clarify the time frame?
Yeah, let me get absolute clarification on that. I think there's been various interpretations of that, but I believe that each region was going to develop, the appropriate training and that kind of stuff. So let me get the actual facts on it. It's been a while. Just commit this up to you, Dr. Walters, from my head without having facts.
So I would, without knowing the details, and obviously Ed's going to get back to us after Pearson's date, I would think that aiming for September, October at this point is probably where we want to be. Does that, in general, make sense to people? I just don't know how quickly we're going to be able to.
Yeah, so I guess my personal feeling is that the changes between the new statewide BLS protocols and what we currently use as BLS providers and the collaboratives is very minimal for us. And so I don't think it needs to be a big, prolonged educational thing. But honestly, I don't even know that we have to have them do, a big rollout and do something online like we did before. We really had a big overhaul. In my mind, I think it would almost be
great opportunities for distant learning stuff. I mean, services that have a lot of providers that they're maybe used to doing that kind of stuff. It probably works very well for their model. But I think those low frequency cases that I referred to,
Yep.
classroom-based learners typically.
So that's what we'll do. I will, when I circle back with Ed, later this week, put an email out with Karen, kind of summarizing, what our understanding is, and at that point, we'll ask for volunteers, to help make the committee, because whatever we're gonna have to do, we're gonna have to make a decision before the subcommittee meeting. So, if anybody has any other thoughts, or any other, bookends or parameters you want to put on that group, speak now. Good.
I promise only 2 more quick things on my report, because that was a sidetrack.
Oh, yeah, we are still on your report.
Yeah, I'm still on my report, yeah.
Way to go,
I
Leonard.
needed that. So just an update on the CME-based research. This was another thing that came up in the conference call, it's a standing item on our agenda. You've heard that there are changes coming. They are still coming. They are still not finalized. The program administration manual is off for the legal eagles to review and finalize, and then the forms will be coming out. So as medical directors, you should expect to hear more about this probably in the next 60 days or so with the changes that are going to happen with CME-based research. And lastly, regarding credentialing in our region, it's encouraging. While we were only at the time of this report 20%, we're up to 25% now compliance with it. As medical directors, for your services, you do have the ability to log into the portal, and you can look at where your agency stands in terms of where they are with credentialing. A lot of times, what we've seen in a number of the agencies is that the officer has just not simply gone in and vetted it by hitting submit. And it seems simple, but that's the guy that goes in to make sure that all the members who are in the agency are actually reflected on the roster, and that they can see who's online and offline. And just hitting the submit button is really a simple, easy thing, and they're done with credentialing. But if they're entering the skills throughout the year, like most of them do, it will show in real time where they stand with their credentialing. So this is something that you as medical directors, if you want to log in, you can look at it, and I will also be sending reports over the next couple of weeks of who your back list is. So, okay.
Flood protocols, I think we kind of covered those issues during Scott's volumes report. QI, Alex, anything? Scott, anything for credit crest field formation?
No changes, they're gonna try to push it out over the summer so we can have most time to get back to having the afternoon.
traffic law in 2011. It's vehicle traffic law number 1194. It's a permissive statewide policy. It authorizes the AEMT to legally obtain a blood sample at the request of a police officer, but the AEMT is not mandated to perform the procedure. And vehicle traffic law 1194 is permissive to all EMT levels, regardless of whether or not a particular level is authorized or utilized within a particular agency and or region. Having in this situation, at least with this agency, having the police officer or officers actually go to a hospital emergency department to get the blood draw would significantly pull away from the police presence in the city. So they are asking that we recognize the New York State Vehicle and Traffic Law 1194 to supersede our policy 2001-1 because they do seem to be in conflict. Simply changing the wording of 2001-1 from may not to the word may perform the blood draw would satisfy that requirement. And so it's in alignment with what the state law says.
So, so my best understanding, thank you, Jason. So my best understanding is that the state law allows AEMTs to do this independent of medical direction and kind of independent of the REMAC. And on an operations level, an agency can decide not to do this, or providers can decide not to do this. But this is somewhat outside of the role of us and the medical director. It gets potentially fraught with problems, but I do agree with Jason's analysis. I spoke to Joe Bart, one of our CMAC Central representatives, and he agrees with that it seems sort of to be outside of our control. Some of us have made recommendations to our agencies that they do not participate in this, but that's sort of their decision based on our recommendation on the order that we're providing. So Jason, my thought actually, to get to the same endpoint that you're trying to get to, but do it differently, is just to eliminate policy. Because if blood draws exist independent of the medical directors and independent of the REMACs, maybe we're better off just staying out of it. Would that satisfy your needs?
Yeah, I think it would. The only question I would have is if, say that AEMT is called by the police department to come down and draw blood. It almost, they might be looking for guidance, if they're not familiar with the vehicle and traffic law.
Right.
They may be looking for guidance, so.
Go ahead, Ed.
There is actually.
Quick, let I get it.
I was just gonna say, I just sent you, Dr. Clemens, we have a DOH policy statement 11-01
Yeah.
that sort of summarizes the two-pager that kind of goes through
Yeah.
most of what you said there, but I think it's nice for an agency.
Everyone has that in their packet also.
The reference document. Oh, great, thank you.
Is there anything you want to point out specifically there?
No, I think you're on the right track, for sure, but I didn't realize it was in the packet, sorry.
No, thank you. Because you reminded me, I forgot that was in the back of the packet. Again, it says physician authorization is no longer required in order to comply with this request is bullet point number 3. Dr. Walters?
I'm just going to point out this state policy as well. I think when you look in that statement, the policy number 1, the word is a little weird. It's kind of this question about whether or not a particular level was authorized to utilize a particular agency or region. So I think that's maybe where there is some, you can have some regional or REMAC policy.
discourage providers from doing this to essentially, for lack of a better way to say it, save them from themselves. Because it would be, good natured to try to do this, but it could potentially be bad for services, the community, and, provider, for the safety, for the personal time of the volunteer setting. And so that was where this policy came from and why it came about, because it was essentially encouraged for each region to adopt these
So
policies.
is this from 2001, and this is
I think
2011?
that's an incorrect number on there. Because
It was reviewed in,
I think Ryan is wrong.
Yeah, Ron, go ahead.
The other issue was, when this first came out, we thought it was great to start with. Back in those days, there were a lot of DWI roadblocks out there, and the sheriff's departments and whatever would have trailers. We were gonna have AEMTs at the trailers to draw blood. And then some, judge somewhere said, in that law at that time, it said, under the direct supervision of a physician, he said, I'm gonna take that to mean that position has to be there. And in the meantime, everything else that we had talked about kind of went away. The other thing that came up with the REMAC that Scott had mentioned was, the medical directors felt that they had some liability if that provider screwed up in the blood draw as well. And that's why another reason why that policy came out at the REMAC level. But it all kind of went away, and that's why they changed the law later to remove the medical supervision portion of it, so that, again, they could try to get AEMTs to do this.
Guys, this is Todd Reisner. My 2 cents on the matter from an operations standpoint solely revolves around the idea that these providers, my employees, may end up getting jammed up in court 4, 5, 6 months down the line. And I don't know from an operational standpoint that we want to do this. And I think that was the prevailing sense when we reviewed this REMAC policy in November of 17.
So, Todd, I agree with you. My question though is, can we I have 2 questions. So before we get to the should we question for Jason, let's get to the can we question. Can we as a region prohibit providers from doing this, given this guidance? I don't think we
The
can.
provider can still go off on their own and do it, because they're covered under law to do it, they're doing it outside the scope of it. This was essentially to send a message to agencies that as a region, you just shouldn't really be doing this, but if you choose to do it on your own, you can. You're permitted through law to do it outside the scope of medical supervision.
So are we just best making this policy statement go away?
I think that's a guidance. I think the crews out there are looking for a little of the meat and potatoes on, are we backed up to do this?
We did it different, we looked in this policy, because custody should, I think it's not as important potential for legal complications, but we take control of where it's taken, custody.
Right.
We do it in the hospital, where it's all locked up, the thing speaks for itself. It's presumed to be accurate, it came from the patient, all these other things.
Yeah, the DOH policy does address that. It mentions things about in the presence of a police officer who will then take immediate custody. It discusses verifying identity and documenting that you did it in an appropriate care record, et cetera. But I agree that there's legal implications here. Before this body makes any changes, probably talk about it to a real lawyer about this and say, what do you think of the implications? Because I agree, it sounds like most of us have some trepidation if it's being done. And before a policy that says one or the other is drafted, it should probably be looked at by somebody who can say, good idea, bad idea.
Individual medical directors can still go to their agencies and say, we think this is a bad idea. But then the agency has to be the one operational, has to adopt.
It also helps the agency though too, because if you're serving in an area where you have a contract and you're perceived as not following the law that's permissive, this policy gave it, and whether we keep it or that doesn't matter, but from an agency standpoint, if you're trying to take care of your customers in your townships and you have contractual relationships, yeah, at least you have this to point to and say, look we're just following the directive for the region, and it took the heat off of a well-intended law, but it took the heat off of those contractors.
Right.
Yep.
Doesn't the state policy make it pretty clear that this is outside the scope of medical direction and therefore moving outside the scope of this body?
That's exactly the direction that's how I read this.
I think the state policy is pretty clear on that point.
Which takes us down a whole different pathway that we don't want to go. I think, at least that's my feeling.
The state seems to put it on the individual provider and on the agency. That's probably where it belongs.
I am drawn to the footnote on the state policy. Even though BTL 94 does not provide for a physician oversight role, medical directors still have a role in blood draw training and infection control procedures, and may be able to offer insight, et cetera, medical legal documentation. And that's just,
Yeah, the intent of the law is not that, I don't think it takes it out from under the scope of this body. It's the direct supervision. I think that's the intent of the law. Read it concretely. There does need to be a position there in a second. You know, but you still need to be able to do it properly. And I think, once we can, it's not a big deal if you have to go to court, it's just inconvenient. And, you just give, I mean, as you said, if you do have a policy, and you let it, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, my concern is not the blood draw. My concern is a provider is asked to draw blood on a drunk patient who has an intracranial hemorrhage. And he draws the blood, then he goes back in service and leaves the patient with a time bomb. That's the piece that gives me angst in all of this.
But this says the onus is on the team to determine that, which it seems a bit unfair.
Right. Right.
Well, it almost contradicts itself though, because this state policy does say, there's no like patient relationship.
yeah. But then 5 says, if they're only going to draw blood, they should just leave. And then 6 says, if they look at the medical attention, you need to get medical attention. It's like, well, which one is it? I don't know.
Right.
This is about how the conversation went and all of this.
Yeah, I mean, this is
Which is why they said you should just have a policy. But whether it matters or not, I get what you're saying. That's where this came from, by the recommendation.
You know, it strikes me that if the onus is put on the provider to make the assessment, I think that provider would be obligated to document his findings on a PCR, and then it would be under the onus of the medical director.
Number 11 in the policy states that the venipuncture must be documented in a paper or electronic chart. So no matter what, this has to be a documented encounter by the AMT. Whether or not there is transport, whether or not they are told you have to get out of here now, even if the patient looks like they need to go to a hospital. It's a very confusing policy document, which I agree with you. It seems to be a little schizophrenic.
Yeah, and as we go through this, this is exactly why the policy is wrong. As you said, this is exactly the conversation that you were riveting that.
But it sounds like we can't really supersede this, but maybe this needs to be looked at on the state level instead. To revise this policy rather than us revising the policy, we really can't.
This is the whole thing about the policy, it's all permissive, it all says may, so
Yeah.
nothing, so you know, nobody has to do anything.
Oh, yeah.
So I think,
if
you know, we come out-
if you have that agency out there who's a volunteer and
Yeah.
they can't summon people, you just have everyone in the agency say, this is not something we do. You know, I mean, I'm pushing this because I have a certain situation where there is there would be a big time lapse for the police to go to the hospital. And, you know, I've talked about, yes, you firefighters, you may be going to court for this. Chief, you're gonna be spending overtime in some cases. They're fine with doing that, so. And I just don't think our policy, especially the way this law is written, can override a state law at this time, if it is voluntary.
But the state law is permissive, so I don't think we're overriding state law. I don't think that's.
We're just making a recommendation, they should do it, but your point is well taken, in terms of if they want to do it. Step into that water, go ahead, go swim. Because the reality is, we're talking about
Table for Dr. Brian.
I was gonna say that to the fourth possibility, so back in a second. We just say that we wanna do something with this, but put up this number we can all percolate to get rid of the policy altogether or try to change it today. All of those are theoretically options. If we are changing a policy statement, it needs to mature to the next meeting anyway, or we tend to let it mature to the next meeting anyway.
I don't think this body can do nothing, actually. The policy.
Oh, you can always do nothing. We're really good at doing that.
How about?
You say that, but so the policy states that the providers under this credentialing are not, in large letters, to comply. However, they've been given a New York State right under their title protection to do this if they so choose, and therefore it's in conflict with New York State law. And this body can really have some problems down the road if there's a policy in conflict with New York State law. Regardless of interpretation, it's just bad form to do that. So I don't think that we can do nothing if we know that this policy is in conflict.
How about getting rid of this policy for now to allow the services that want to do this, like Dr. Border's service, to be able to do it while we craft either position statement or the policy? Otherwise, we're putting it off the whole summer, where this may be the biggest time of year where your agency may have benefit from doing this and taking people out of the area. That's not a big change because you have the law anyway. Because if we're going to try to write this today, it's not going to happen. But if we get rid of it, then the agency can do what they want to do.
The policy will exist in record somewhere, and if someone wants to just copy and paste and change a few words, it's not hard to do that and adopt a new policy in the future, but I think we have to get rid of it for now to avoid any conflict with state law, which supersedes. And then future members can decide how to best approach moving forward.
Sounds good. I like that.
See, now we do have legal review. You didn't think of legal review. So I guess the recommendation is to kill this policy statement, and then to have people think about it. Is it going to come back to life after the summer's over, or will it just, in a new form, or just stay dead? Is that the spirit of the body?
My feeling is that, again, I think that a lot of people have concerns about agencies doing this or providers doing this, and I think with strong record. I guess recommend other agencies they don't do this, but I think if an agency wants to, they do it appropriately.
Right.
And I don't feel strongly about stopping them. I don't know that we're gonna be able to craft a policy that's gonna be any less convoluted than the state policy, just because it's a very nuanced, difficult ordeal, and for the amount of time it's been come up, I don't think we should even wade into it. It would be a big waste of time, honestly. And you still wouldn't cover all the possibilities. So I would say just get rid of our policy as it is, and let the state policy stand on its own, and the agency that wants to do it, the onus is on them and their lawyers and their policy makers to develop it.
So I'd like to make a point. You know, just what you're saying, if we dissolve the policy and that's it, we allow the agencies to proceed. My other concern is that, you know, it says in here that the onus falls on the provider who's going to perform the service. However, then down at the end, you know, you're saying that it's going to then have to enter an official PCR on your agency record for which you are the medical director, and you have one of your providers who are under your purview perform a medical procedure on a patient. You know, so I think it does fall under the medical director purview. I understand what you're saying, Jason, about how you don't want to take a police officer out of service. And I disagree with you. Like I hear nurses complain about all the time at the Catholics how they had to go to court and they're asked if they used alcohol or betadine and how they drew the tubes. And we don't even, has any one of our providers within the REMAC system been trained to do a police blood draw? There's definitely a standard. And the nurses, when they do it, they have the kit, they have the betadine, they have a whole little setup. I've seen it done in the emergency room before. I'm sure many of us have seen it. And then get sealed up and it's given to the police officer, but there's a standard by the way they do this. So if you have someone at the roadside who's banged up in a car crash and they think he's drunk, and he does have a subarachnoid hemorrhage, and you pull over one of the EMTs that says, hey, I can draw your blood, and then, you know, it's documented in the PCR, you know, we are liable. Like, that is a liability, I think. So I think if we kill the policy, and then just let the providers do whatever they want, number one.
Well, not the end of the project. So, like, I mean, my next move, if this gets killed, my next move is to notify all my agencies. I recommend they don't do this.
I don't feel strongly about stopping them. I don't know that we're gonna be able to craft a policy that's gonna be any less convoluted than the state policy.
Is that the recommendation?
Just because it's a very nuanced, difficult ordeal, and for the amount of time it's been come up, I don't think we should even wade into it. It would be a big waste of time, honestly. And you still wouldn't cover all the possibilities. So I would say just get rid of our policy as it is, and let the agency that wants to do it, the onus is on them and their lawyers and their policy makers to develop it.
So can't force you not to do it, but I do not recommend you do it.
Does anybody have any specific case law that shows that medical director was held liable for the acts of a duly certified, EMT who was doing operation in the field and failed to recognize someone? I mean, I don't know that that's an extension of liability to the medical director, if that's the concern. That seems to be pretty tenuous. I mean, you're not, and so I don't, I mean, unless there's case law out there in New York State that's precedent, I think that's a bit tenuous to extend, to you, Chris, somebody that's under your purview who improperly does this, and then there's some sort of bad outcome. They missed the subarachnoid hemorrhage, or they, whatever it is. I mean, I think because every day you run that risk of someone improperly. I mean, shit. Somebody yesterday brought me someone who laid down the motorcycle doing a wheelie going 45 miles an hour out in Elma. To Mercy. It's a bad idea, right? Bad decision, violates the trauma protocol. Yet they did it. But I don't think the medical director for that agency is liable for that decision. You know what I mean? So I think that the prohibition to doing this is more about the logistics of what does it mean to take somebody out of circulation? Do they understand what they're doing themselves into? I don't think you really need to worry about liability specifically as the medical director. That seems a long string to attach.
So just another portion here in this middle section here. So they're saying like they're only responsible for doing the blood draw and that's it. So if a police officer brings you a patient and says, this guy has altered mental status, he looks like he's drunk and on drugs, I want you to draw blood. That completely, does that rescind your function to perform medical evaluation?
What says it doesn't? It doesn't have a law though. It says you have to do that.
You still have to provide a medical evaluation.
Perhaps we should reformulate the policy that says, reiterates the fact that you have an obligation as a provider to provide an appropriate, we recommend you have to do an appropriate screening exam. Before you fall back in the position of simply doing a blood draw with a police officer.
Says that the agency will determine if medical care and transportation is needed. If there's uncertainty, then they will call us and put the doc on the police officer. And this is the state policy on the matter, so it seems reasonable.
Take some comments, Welsh.
Yeah, one of the things, I think there's some confusion. You can be called to do just a blood draw. If somebody meets criteria to be evaluated, that's a separate circumstance where you rule out a medical issue first before you do the blood draw. The other thing to remember is that the same kits that they use in the hospital as far as evidentiary go are used by the EMTs. There's specific directions in that kit, wipe with a betadine swab, etc., to follow that same procedure. That's why, as far as evidence goes, everything is the same as it was being done in the hospital. And the whole procedure takes about 15 minutes, start to finish. It really doesn't take a lot of time as far as consuming providers for being on the road. Conversely, for the law enforcement officer to take someone to the hospital, it could take 1, 2, 3, 4 hours, even longer, depending on how busy it is, because it's a low priority. That's one of the reasons why these law enforcement agencies are looking to have ALS providers provide this service. And we've been doing this since the policy was changed by New York State, and we've had 0 issues. It's way less daunting than it seems. But it does require some medical director education and also some oversight to make sure that you're not blowing off people just because they're drunk or they have unknown medical issues.
I think that summarizes exactly the issue perfectly. Thank you. That's it. But I mean, I don't think it's to take our EMS colleagues, our EMS out of commission for very long. It's a pretty simple procedure, and we should be, as the law says, we should be doing some sort of screening examination to decide if we think, because we don't care what the police officer's saying. If the police officers themselves no longer hold people because they're drunk, they bring everybody to the hospital. They don't want to take that liability on themselves. So they're asking for some sort of medical evaluation. So I think maybe we should craft the policy at our next meeting just to move on. Rephrase it. Maybe we could table it for now, rephrase it. Something that says that you may comply with New York State law, but do so understanding that you have an obligation to evaluate the patient properly and perform the tasks appropriately with appropriate oversight and supervision from the medical director to make sure the process occurs properly.
Brian? 2 points. One, I think this is being considered in view of AEMTs being requested through an agency level. The law puts it on the AEMT as a provider. They don't have to be involved with the agency or with the WREMAC to do this. They have to be credentialed by the Bureau of EMS as an AEMT. So medical direction, they could be on their own. They're not necessarily involved with an agency. The second point is the question of his body. It's not a question of whether this is agency level and recommendations from the state extended to the agency, how does this body create a policy that tells the agency, you can't do something that you're otherwise permitted to do by the state as an agency yourself and not operationalized with medical correctional considerations?
Okay, where do we go from here, friends?
I vote that we would rescind or remove policy, REMAC policy 2001-1 and comply with the state vehicle and traffic law 1194.
Second that. Okay, any other discussion?
I rescinded, but I recommend we put some sort of clarification.
Okay.
Policy in the future.
But that one is not dependent on the other.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying repeal of this?
Yes.
Okay, very good. All in favor? No, yeah.
Because you made a point before about saying, the first thing you're gonna do is if we get rid of this policy is send all your agencies, we think it's a bad idea, you shouldn't do it.
Not we, me.
So, should we get rid of, should we just make a simple, should our policy just say that, we want a policy that just says, you're allowed to do this, we think it's a bad idea?
I don't think we're that business. Yeah, I think.
Since it's not a.
For some of my agencies,
I think we
I would
need
not
to
recommend this.
provide some measure of guidance by just removing the policy. I think we do a disservice to the people we serve. I think at the very least, we need to have some guidance, say, the REMAC recommends agencies develop their own internal policies that takes into consideration the VNT law and DOH policy statement 11-01.
It's already stated.
I think the policy already says on that.
It's already a state policy, I don't think there's any need to try to mess with it. It's a two-page, 11 point with a preamble and conclusion policy there. It's pretty rock solid. I mean, I don't know what else there's to add.
I don't think you need anything, but I recommend simplify. I don't think it's good. I just, well, it's absolutely simple, because that's, as we've all decided, it's pretty complicated. It seems to be counterintuitive. I think maybe, that's just fine. That was written by a bunch of lawyers and administrators who kept adding thoughts. It's not very functional. We think it's artificial, but we'll push it.
Unlike collaborative protocols and so forth, the medical clerk has the right to supersede. This is state law. We don't have a right to supersede state law, and state policy should be upheld when possible. So I do think that the guidance comes from the state, not from the REMAC in this case.
Okay, so any other discussion? We have a motion and a second to rescind policy statements 2001-1 as amended most recently in 2017, or as reviewed most recently in 2017. There's a motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? All right.
Just one thing first, so that should be moved to the archive page.
Yes, please.
Marked as such.
Yes, please. Thank you. Tucker County,
Just to clarify, that was just to remove it,
yes, it just, yep,
just to remove it.
correct. There's no supporting policy statement at this time. Chicago County EMS requests another letter from the REMAC for the leadership of Chicago County EMS to establish a municipal ambulance service at the paramedic level of care under new agency code 6267. Can you remind us what we did previously?
I was told that's what they needed, and then apparently that's not what they needed. So now they need it, because they have their code, they are now a meeting, they did a meeting after a basic ambulance,
Okay.
which they have their new number, which is that 6 number that you read, and now they need this in order to allow that Unicom to operate at the advanced level for 2 years before they do the full application.
Had we previously given them a letter about something else?
We did, but it was not what they needed.
What was it?
It was very similar to that letter. I was told that's not what they needed. I literally added the agency code to that letter, because they didn't have an agency
So,
code at that time.
okay, so it's good to me. No, sounds good to me. I just want to make sure it wasn't more difficult than I thought it
told
was.
different things,
Yep.
so.
Good. It's almost the same. Thank you.
Did you use the right font though?
Yeah. I'm more of a Times New Roman guy, and
I'm an aerial girl.
yeah. Well played. Okay, South Wilson, number 3 is South Wilson Volunteer Fire Company requesting a letter of support from the REMAC to obtain a CON to become an ALSFR agency. And they're here. How many event providers do you have?
We have one at the moment, but, so that's, one of the challenges that we're facing, is that none of our providers are gonna go take that extra next step to the next level of care. They're not guaranteed to use their skills as a volunteer. So currently, we are at one.
So basically, Brian, it's this vicious cycle. Nobody wants to go because they can't get the ALSFR. If they don't get the ALSFR, nobody's gonna go, so forth and so forth.
And is ALSFR to what level?
Advanced,
To advanced.
yes.
Questions, comments, thoughts?
So,
Who's your medical director?
Franco.
Okay.
Dr. Franco.
so what's the letters to, letter of support to obtain a CON from the ALSFR?
You guys already have a CON.
We
No.
submitted it once, yes, and then there was some errors found in that. And then we were told that we need to ask this body for approval to resubmit our comment.
They are VLSFR members.
I'm sorry?
They are VLSFR members.
They're ALSFR with numbers right now.
Okay.
Oh, but because the BLSFR, you go to ALSFR, you go to a separate new CON as opposed to if you're an ambulance agency, you can just change your letter.
We have to have a CON.
Yeah.
We don't have that. It's a very, Winchester went through this a number of years ago, it's about $10,000 lead. Yeah, because they don't have a con. They have to go through the full CON process. So you're probably doing a MuniCon right now,
No,
right?
it's not a muni.
You're not a muni.
Because you already have
So you're going through the full CON process, including the hearings.
Correct.
The code is irrelevant. It's the fact that they'll get a new code when they get this. So they are going through the full CON process. CONs do not differentiate between the ALSFR and the transporting ambulance and so forth. It's a CON. They're going through the full process. They're putting 5 digits on the counter of money to move forward with this. And so what they're essentially saying, if I'm not lying, is without the approval of this body, the support, saying that they would be supported as an ALSFR, where one ALS provider. There's others who want to go, but they can't, because without that CON, they can't get the training paid for, the subsidy or any of that stuff, so they wouldn't get this additional training.
So remind me, haven't we done things in the past with a letter of support for agencies so that providers can take an EMT class but get reimbursed by the state?
We have to show that they have the intent to operate.
When you realize you train that they intend to move forward.
And that allows them to get providers through and get paid for before they have a CON.
But I think that those have.
Those are already.
They had
All the
they had
ambulance
CON.
services that had CON.
So I don't, maybe I can speak to this, I'm not sure if the Bureau would preliminarily approve this because they don't actually have the ability that once these guys become advanced providers, they still can't be advanced providers because they have no provision within the law to do so.
But they can jump like the cops.
Justin Barrett.
Friends?
From the state perspective,
Thank you.
we're looking to have a provisional approval type situation pending their authorization of their CON, if they have to still go through the full application once they get their CON. We just need the preliminary approvals we're looking at from the state perspective and the Big Lakes Council for the CON.
So I think the concern, I think you asked the question is,
It's my favorite question.
Yeah.
Care changes.
yeah, is approving a ALS agency or supporting ALS agency to become a provider. I think it's sometimes problematic, although it seems like if you don't, then you don't, I don't know what the answer is.
So
So this is my problem, it's not specific to South Wilson, but it's our general question that we keep asking ourselves, right? Because once we send an agency up, we have zero review ever to bring it back down, or at least we just operationally don't, right? So 10 years from now, if they're still at one provider, and again, I don't mean to be specific to South Wilson, I really don't, this is a large discussion that we have to have later on, is, kind of what are we doing with these many agencies that have a very small number of providers? I think in keeping with what we've done in the past, I think it's reasonable to approve this, but I think at some point we need to have a more in-depth conversation with how we address these very small agencies and how they're able to maintain ongoing competency or without a single or two or three providers. So I think in the short term, though, I think this is consistent with other stuff we've approved in the past for agencies that have a very small number of providers. We still supported theirs if they have a reasonable plan. And I'm assuming from the program agency, you've discussed this with them, and it's your recommendation.
We've had many discussions, and yes.
Is there a motion to support South Wilson Volunteer Fire Company?
I so much.
Good, a second. Okay, and then just for the record, this will get approved at this meeting. There is a possibility I will sign it after this meeting. Mike will be chairman at the time, but I'll still sign the letter. Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, good. WREMAC representative changes. Big Leagues Council, Dr. Eric Peterson from UMFC to Dr. Naveen Seth. And I have already forgotten, I apologize.
Mike Mangione.
Mike Mangione was approved by Big Lakes, or by the White Motion Hearing. Is that
I
correct?
believe so.
It was on their page.
Okay, all right. That's good, welcome. Medical director changes from South Wales Volunteer Fire Company from Dr. Bart to the WREMAC chair. And so the WREMAC chair will have to be in touch with them about what to do. That is an agency who is being separated from their medical director. And we're going to talk to them about how indefinite they'll be able to have the WREMAC chair as the medical director. It's nothing nefarious. They just decided to part ways. Epi syringe notification. So I'm looking at 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, which are medical director change, epi syringe notice, naloxone notice, pad notice, and ePCR approval. Does anyone have any questions about those or reasons why we cannot approve them in mass? Very good. Is there a motion to approve 5 through 9 in mass? And a second? Thank you, Dr. Gordon. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, thank you. One last piece of business. So this is the summer. I'm correct on the phone? There's new business on the phone?
Yeah, actually, there is. Dr. Clemency said Major, if I do have an official statement on the protocol rollout, if you'd like to hear.
Fantastic. Go for it.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's not doesn't have much detail. Other than it says very clearly, the Bureau has received feedback from the EMS community requesting additional time to implement the statewide BLS protocol. The Bureau has presented these concerns to DOH senior leadership and is holding discussions on the appropriate course of action. We will provide an update as soon as it is available.
Is that from today? Or how far back?
A moment ago.
A moment ago.
Yeah, a moment ago.
Gotcha. All right. All right.
That really cleared it up. You're very welcome.
They've outsourced the leadership to India, or?
All right. Thank you, Ed. You really do anything to get out of calling me later, huh?
I guess so.
Okay, I would ask for a motion to allow the chairman of the WREMAC, Dr. O'Brien, to take care of the WREMAC business over the summer until we reconvene in September. Traditionally, the chairman has the ability to approve levels of changes and most of the operations of the WREMAC. He also has the ability, if something he feels would not be unanimously approved, to stall it until September. But the idea behind this is for the WREMAC chairman to approve things which he or she feels would be approved with consensus and without any acrimony or question would be subject to reapproval by the body.
And in this case, it would be perhaps protocol rollout.
And protocol rollout would have to, I think is specifically gonna be on that list. That, you're right, is the exception, but it is probably something that's gonna be a tad bit controversial. But other than that, most of the things we try to limit over the summer, just things are obvious. But that's a good point, Brian. Any questions about that? Is there a motion to allow the REMAC chairman to make summer approvals subject to approval of the REMAC at the September meeting? Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Dr. Cosgrove. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Any, yes?
Will his contact information be the same as the one
It's a great question. If it's a Gmail account, then the answer is yes. If it's not a Gmail account, ask Karen. I don't know if his Buffalo stuff has been reactivated yet. Okay. Any other, but continue to try to talk to Karen, because he's gonna lose it just like I lose it. if he's such a-
We see her.
Yeah, all right. Any other issues? Yes.
Andy Steele, Chief of Leroy Ambulance. I just have two things. One, with agencies that are closing, things like that, just want to clarify information that's out there. We are not closing. I know it's been across the news, things like that, but we are not. And then a second thing, it's really not for the ALS, or this board, or this body, shall I say, is I just received information, it might be geared towards Genesee, Orleans County, for CLIA for blood country. A lot of agencies, such as like Leroy, we have a lot of multi-site network, where we have feel like the fires on board with us. They want to start dismantling those.
Yes, they will. We are reviewing every single.
Okay, I just wanted to see if anyone
It's
else.
been fun.
affected.
They realized they were losing too much money, I'm sure.
It's been.
So I don't know if the agencies out there are just gonna say, we're just gonna do it whatever.
But we've had to take quite a few hours off breaks because they don't have the plan. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of work stuff.
Do a lot of them, like, do we have?
Yes, what happened was they used to have, we had county ones. Now, Bobby hasn't been nailed yet, so if he knows about this, so he's kind of waiting. But in Allegheny County, they got nailed for being all under the Allegheny County Department of Health. And they told us that's not legal and not allowed. So we have been dismantling and redoing everybody's application.
I mean, people are not really taking the blue collars off.
Yes, they are. No, we got that's how it came up.
Can we do an assistive device, purchase a glucometer, and leave them on the counter and say, I can't use it, but you can use it if you like?
And they're allowed to use other people. They're allowed to assist.
I mean, it was a real problem in Allegheny County. I mean, we were getting ALS intercepts with squads that were ALS over squads because we didn't have clear lists. It was a operational nightmare for 30 to 60 days. I mean, it truly is an issue. And I don't truly believe it's money-based because 90% of the agencies are gonna waive the fee for anyways. The only person that you're not gonna waive the fee
All your
for-
BLSFRs won't be able to.
If you're, I mean, the only ones that had to pay in our county were the commercial services.
So the main issue was that for tax ID number, because you don't, like, the individual agencies do not have the same tax ID number as the county health department. So the county health department doesn't own the agency.
So they have no way of tracking because it was all in the one tax ID number.
When did it
Maybe
start?
let's just focus on the
When
blood
did
regulation.
this
Just recently.
Scott, when did it start?
It was about 3 months ago when we got hit with it.
I mean, we've been trying to be really quiet and not let anybody else know that anybody else does that. So we're like, oh, sorry, it's just because of us.
I mean, so for whatever it's worth, I'm just disappointed that, you know, we weren't hearing about this in our monthly call that we have with Bureau leadership, where these are the kinds of issues that are supposed to come out.
Well, that might be my fault, but I mean.
It's not your fault.
We've been
You weren't
trying
the one
to be very
initiating this.
quiet. Yeah, we've been trying to get it all taken care of, so,
Yeah.
like, Cattaraugus County doesn't have it happen to them.
Why don't we just tell them that they scare them off.
So, I mean, I think we're almost got everything.
Parting shot?
Yeah, we've got everything kind of all.
When you hear that there's only one in the field, they're
Go ahead.
If I could just say something, I know that some of those things are difficult to work through, but I would suggest that if you have previously applied as a county or as a group, that you send that application in just as you did previously first, before you make any changes. Because we had the Allegheny County situation. What happened was they allowed their certificate to, or their clear license to expire, and then there was an inquiry made, and it brought out some additional information that if they would have just sent the application in a timely fashion, that probably would not have been modified or changed or disrupted the situation in that particular account. So if you have previously applied as a group or under a county or a multi-agency situation, then I would do that just as you did previously. I can't guarantee by any means that it'll get approved, but typically they are approved, I guess is what the message that I